Hello, my name is Declan O'Sullivan. I'm the Managing Director of Kerry Consulting, and today I'd like to talk to you about how to succeed in an interview. I'd like to look at this in three sections. One is preparation, the next is technique, and then finally I'd like to have some role plays so that one can look at common problems and how to avoid them. So without further ado, preparation. If you want to perform well in an interview, you will need to prepare yourself for it, without a doubt. Preparation starts with a good CV, and this is a very big topic in its own right, and in fact there's material on our website which would be worth looking at. CV is vital, and it's really the process of writing the CV which will bring you back through your memories and will allow you to be quite clear on the points that you need to highlight in an interview. Very, very important. Lots of research on the role itself. So assuming you're going for a specific position, you should know as much about that as possible. And you can get that information either from an intermediary, as in a recruitment consultant, or directly from the company or whomever. And really do think about it. The company itself. Again, it's surprising how little research candidates often do on potential employers. And it's very, very hard to sell yourself as really wanting to work for a particular company if in the next breath you reveal that you don't know anything about it. It's not a strong position. So you need to know about the financials, you need to know about the culture, you need to know about the competitors, you need to know about their profile in Asia Pacific, assuming you're in Asia Pacific, etc., etc. Culture is important as well. And how you do that is you look at the financials, obviously, and do the sort of equities analyst approach, but you also need to talk to people who've worked there, ideally. Inside track is important as well. So you need to know about the company, also the industry in which it operates. So again, having a working knowledge of the key drivers in a particular industry is important. And really you're demonstrating that you're interested, that you know how to research things, that you understand how big issues interact with smaller issues. Very few people invest sufficient energy in this activity. It really is vital. And when you consider that you're going to an interview to be selected as the #1 candidate, it's a competitive activity. Then it's all about distinguishing yourself from other people. And if you put a few extra hours into preparation, you really can achieve that. You also need to know what you're selling yourself. That is to say, what are your unique selling points as it pertains to this role, this company, this industry, whatever. These could include specific experience, very probably will, academic excellence, extracurricular activities, whatever. But in any event, you need to decide on 4 or 5 of these points before the interview, and make sure then that you manage to drum those points home during the meeting. Again, what you don't want to have is a list of either 0 points to communicate, or a list of 25 points, because you certainly won't have time to sell a couple of dozen ideas in the course of a 1-hour meeting. It's quite impossible. Another thing you want to do is you want to try to get inside the mind of the interviewer. Now, oftentimes you won't even have met the interviewer, so that may seem like a difficult task. But at the end of the day, I mean, an interviewer for a particular company in a particular role is very probably going to have particular concerns, and you should try to think about that up front. And the further ahead you can go in that decision cycle, the better. So what is he or she really looking for? Once you've answered these questions, you really are halfway home, and you can position yourself far more appropriately. It's not about inventing experience or skills. It's about making sure that you during the course of possibly a 1-hour meeting, that you actually have the opportunity to present yourself in the best possible light. That's all. Again, it's important. You should also think of the obvious questions you could be asked and prepare suitable answers. Now, some role-playing could be very useful at this point. Particularly if you haven't had an interview for a number of years, it's quite a good idea to actually sit down with somebody quite seriously and have them, without being unnecessarily difficult, but have them pose challenging questions in a serious kind of environment to you. And again, The more you practice, the easier it will be to perform on the day, typically. Now again, I mean, if you go to interviews every week for whatever reason, then you may not need to do this, but most people will actually. Think about very common interview questions before you go to a meeting. There are a list of questions that will crop up in almost all interviews. Just go to Google and type in common interview questions and think about them in the context of yourself and the position you're going for. But questions such as, why do you want to join this company? Why this particular position? Why should we hire you? What are your long-term goals? What weaknesses do you have? Tell me about your extracurricular activities. Describe your ideal corporate culture. Most of these questions will crop up in most interviews, so there's really no excuse for not being prepared for them. And the more prepared you are, the more fluent you can be, and the more energy you can invest in communicating your answers in a convincing way, as distinct from spending time trying to come up with an answer on the fly. So there's some thoughts there around preparation. In summary, it's important, and it will definitely help you to perform well in this meeting. Let's move on to the subject of technique. So having prepared yourself for the interview, you should now focus on the fact that the interview is just a conversation. Now, it may be one-on-one, or it may be two-on-one, or God forbid you may be in a panel interview with 5 people, but nonetheless it is just a conversation. So there are no hidden tricks. So you need to be yourself and convey certain key points. Some of them will be technical things, some of them will relate to your experience, but most importantly, you're really telling these people about yourself as a human being. And you need to be conveying things like energy. People want to hire energetic people, as a general comment. Drive. People want people who are self-motivated, who want to get things done, who have commitment. Discipline. As we all know, it's very, very hard to operate in a modern business environment without a high level of discipline. And again, these themes should be conveyed one way or another during the course of your meeting. Emotional stability. What manager hasn't hired people who are incredibly time intensive, and most managers will have perhaps 10 people directly reporting to them, so they don't need high maintenance people. What they do need are people who are mature, are stable, have a bit of a sense of humour, who can get things done, who can work with people without creating unnecessary dramas. So these sorts of things are important as well. And again, interviewers will draw inferences from the things you say and how you present yourself in a meeting. And that's what they will base their decision on in the main. So other points: punctuality, get there in time. You may need to do some route planning for this, and beware of the trap of deciding that you can get from A to B in 30 minutes because you did it at 10:30 at night, and when you're trying to do it at 7:30 in the morning in rush hour, well, it's obviously going to take a lot longer. So, be conservative about these things. Obviously your actual physical presentation, you don't need to look absolutely fantastic, but you do need to meet a basic standard. Very importantly, you need to actively listen to your interviewer and answer the question that's being asked. Now, you may very well and probably should actually answer the questions being asked and then tag on something about yourself that you want to convey in the return bowl, so to speak. But if you miss the basic point, the interviewer is going to draw conclusions about your intelligence, about your ability to listen, etc. None of them will be positive. And the interviewer will increasingly become frustrated because, of course, they're trying to cover some ground as well. Don't try to lead the interview. At the end of the day, the interviewer is basically running the meeting, and you need to fit into that. There's a hierarchy involved in these things. You should also have a list of prepared questions in mind before coming to the meeting. You don't need to be fumbling around for these things in a meeting. At some point, the interviewer, 9 times out of 10, is going to say, "Do you have any questions?" So it would be well worth your while to have a list of questions. Now, actually, as the meeting progresses, you may very well have ticked off 4 or 5 of them. So have a long list of questions so that you still have reserve questions without having to rack your brain under pressure. Often a good idea to ask the interviewer what they're looking for in an ideal candidate, as an example. Things to avoid is don't talk about salary. At least don't raise the subject. Now is not the time. Basically the time to have a conversation about salary or expectations, all that sort of thing, is when the potential employer has demonstrated their great interest in you. In other words, you're the preferred candidate. They want to make you an offer. Psychologically, they'll be committed to that process. And you're on a very much stronger ground at that point, rather than talking essentially about the price up front. In summary, you don't sell anything by talking about the price. You talk about the benefits. And the last thing that should be talked about is cost and price and so on and so forth. Important to end on a positive note. You want to thank the interviewer for his or her time. Express a keen interest in the role if you have an interest. But it is important to end on a very positive note, because often that's what the interviewer will remember. And you should also ascertain what the process is going forward. What you don't want to do is be in a situation where 2 weeks after the meeting you're still waiting for a phone call, you don't feel you can call back, etc., etc. It's very unpleasant. So avoid these types of situations by simply saying, well, what will the process be going forward? And the interviewer will often say, well, we'll be in touch in 3 or 4 days, and so on and so forth. It's just much more controlled. What we will do now is we'll move on to some role plays, and we're going to look at a number of common scenarios, and we're going to first of all have not a terribly effective way of handling the situation, and then we'll have a better way, and perhaps you can learn something from that as well. Thanks very much.